Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Michael and Patty Show. I'm Michael.
And I'm Patty.
And it's wonderful to have you aboard for another episode, this being episode 138. We're at about 20 to 30%, probably closer to 20% of the boats have been lowered into the Charlottetown Yacht Club water. Summer is around the corner, despite the fact that it's only 9 degrees Celsius today. And actually, they called for snow yesterday, if you can believe it, because it was 3.
Yeah, we had snow the end of April, which, yes, we had a dumping when we woke up, which was quite pretty and melted by the end of the day. But it's also nice to have you on today, Michael. So thanks for being here.
Let's get right to it, Patty. First thing I need to do is congratulate you on picking up a listing that the previous agents decided to purchase. And what we mean by buying a listing is this. What typically happens is someone decides to sell their home. So, of course, Patty, you, I think, will agree with this statement. Everybody has a bunch of friends that have the real estate license. So they're they're filled with knowledge about real estate, even though they've probably only bought and sold 1 or 2 houses in their lifetime, but they're all experts. And the advice they give the new home seller is what? Find 3
real estate professionals to get the highest price. Don't let someone come in and price it too low and leave money on the table.
So we're going to put that level of stupidity aside, and it's just a lack of knowledge of how real estate really works. Because just because somebody says something is worth something doesn't make it a fact. No different than me owning Facebook stock at $700 a share and somebody thinks it's worth $14,000 a share. It doesn't change the intrinsic value or the value of that stock, and that's the same with real estate. So if I'm selling something, even though I'm in the real estate business and have been so for decades and transacted on thousands of properties, first thing I do is I just get it appraised. Wouldn't you?
Yeah, it is the most common sense approach because now you know what a property for a purchaser is going to end up appraising at, which at the end of the day, when you do generate a sale on the property, that is one of the most important components of the sale is to make sure that a buyer, most of them, majority of buyers will need some form of financing, so it's going to need to appraise at the purchase price.
And the appraisal typically is going to be market value. But what people do is they listen to their expert friends and they bring in 3 agents. And I'll just give you an example of what might happen with those 3. Agent number 1 just says, "So what do you want for it, Patty?"
Yes, right? I've heard that.
I've heard that before, and it's the path of least resistance. You just ask them what they want, put it on the market, and then you do, is it the 3 or the 4 Ps?
You do the 4 Ps, but I say the 3 Ps. Put it on, take some pictures, put it on the MLS, and pray it sells.
Absolutely. What was the 4th P?
I'm not sure what you had as a 4th. Put up a sign?
Put up a sign. So that's methodology number 1. Methodology number 2 is they put a low price on it to sell it instantly. In fairness to all agents and brokers, I find this is extremely rare. I probably know of 1 agent out of maybe 500 and change that use this as a business policy. Yeah. Ethically and morally, it's not something you should be doing.
But as long as the strategy was explained, so even with this particular realtor or any realtor across Canada or North America that uses this as their strategy to try to generate, because I know in markets in Ontario, they do price them a little bit low so that they can generate.
But that's a whole different situation.
That's what I'm saying. If it's a strategy based on the type of market that you exist in, then that could create especially if there's a large buyer's pool at that price point, then you could create multiple offers and you end up getting market value, if not more.
But that's a whole different situation. And that's
agree.
A situation that in different areas of North America they've tried to make illegal. So what they are doing is they basically take a house that was worth $1.5 million, $2 million, and they put it on the market for $300,000. And they knew they would have 20 or 30 or 40 multiple offers that would drive the selling price up to or beyond market value. But that's not our market, and that's not most markets. What I'm talking about is an agent that knows the property is worth $500K. They put it on for $350. It sells in 2 days. Very rare that ever happens. Agent number 3, and that's what happened in this case, is you've got a house, let's just hypothetically say it's worth $100,000. The owners normally, and you can give me your input on this, pretty well 100% of homeowners, with the exception of professional real estate people, think their house is worth more. Extremely rare to find any homeowner that's realistic as far as what it's worth in market value. They all think their house is the best location, best builder, best floor plan, blah, blah, blah. It's not. Best views. So they usually think it's worth more than it is. So in this particular case, what happened is the agents just gave them this big, huge number that was 20, 30, 50% over market value in order to get the listing, because they realized if they held on to that listing long enough, they may be able to reduce it down to market value eventually in 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, who knows? So I think the vendors lost patience, realized that absolutely nothing was happening, because in essence, what they are doing, because the agent bought the listing and it was on at a really ridiculous price, way over market, is they helped all their neighbors sell their homes. Because the consumer thinks, and I had someone email this to me about a week or so ago, oh, if that house is worth $200,000 and this one is on for $125,000, this is an awesome deal, even though the other house that's on for $200K is worth $125,000. So what you're doing is you're helping your neighbors sell their properties. The listing agents got the listing, but they're probably not going to sell it because they're using the 3 or the 4P method. Patty?
Yeah, pricing a property above market value comes down to what is the seller's motivation to sell. If you want to sit on that property for a couple years, then absolutely. Again, as long as the number reflects and there's been a conversation, the seller understands that for the property to sell within average days on market for that type of location, price point, then that's realistic. If a seller wants a higher number, as long as it's been explained to them that it's going to take longer days on market and sometimes a couple years in order for the market to reach that inflated price, then that's okay. But if you are going in and buying a listing, or if you're a seller with unrealistic expectations and you have been advised by all these real estate hobbyists who have told you, do not let your agent underprice this property. It is at a steal of a deal. They're pricing it too low at that price. Well, then tell them, if it is priced so low, then why are you not buying it? Because I've dealt with this many times where a seller will want to price it high and then it does end up sitting, and then they're wondering, why is it still on the market? And it's just the market's talking to us. And it's a sliding scale, so you would need to do price adjustments. The point of this conversation and discussion that we're having is about buying a listing, giving an inflated price. We do support getting multiple market assessments. And if you don't want to go that path and you trust the person that you're working with and you've seen the data, you see the value, you understand, and you just want one other source, then just pay to get an appraisal done. And that's probably the path of least resistance. You'll know what it's going to appraise at when a buyer does put in their offer.
The bottom line is it's a lot easier just to get it appraised. For the sake of a few $100s, if we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially for the sale of a house, get the appraisal done. You've got an unbiased third party putting a price on it based on data. If you're going to price it through an agent, make sure you revert back to the data to see the same data the appraiser is going to see, so you can form a conclusion. Now, let's just assume that you had a comment.
No, I was just going, you go with this and then I'll.
So let's just assume, let's just say somebody saved a bunch of money for the last 40 years of their life, and now they're in their 60s and they're buying their first house and they fall in love with it. It's on for big dollars, way above market value. They decide to buy it because they don't care what the price is. They go to the bank. What's the first thing the bank says? They order an appraisal. So then it gets shut down anyway. So the bank's going to protect themselves because in essence, they are buying the property, not the purchaser, especially if the mortgage is highly leveraged, which it usually is.
Okay, so one thing then for the listeners to understand, when we recommend and advise, best case scenario, to interview 3 realtors, Michael, can you tell them what the interviewing 3 realtors should be about and what it shouldn't be about?
Well, number one, I don't interview anybody unless they are an expert. So an expert, based on what we said in the show and by many other parameters within other shows and that, they'll tell you someone that's done 1,000 transactions, the key point being in that market. We're in Prince Edward Island, in the Prince Edward Island market. We want them to have at least 10,000 hours full-time experience. We're not looking for hobbyists. We're looking for someone that's been doing this for at least 5 years, 40 hours a week. That adds up to about 10,000 hours. Next thing I'm going to look at is their credentials. How many different credentials they have. Have they taken negotiating courses? Have they taken marketing courses? Have they taken psychology courses to understand the psychology behind buyers and sellers? Do they have a background in law at all so they can put together a paragraph that absolutely makes sense? I want to know what they're going to do to market the property and probably know how successful they've been at that statistically. Did I hit everything?
Yeah, I would say. So now you're not interviewing real estate professionals, and you did exactly what I was looking for, Michael, based on what they have to offer in their services and not selecting a real estate professional based on the price, because that's when you fall into the trap of you've just had your listing bought. So make sure you understand. Now, real estate agents, because I know myself, I'm not going to sit here and give you an extensive list of the things that I do to market a property, because sometimes you're going to have a for sale by owner who is just fishing and wants to know what you do so that they can go ahead and try replicating it and doing it themselves. But they should have a marketing plan. They should have a marketing presence. You should be able to see previous listings of theirs. What kind of representation? How is your property going to be presented out there? Are the toilet seat lids up? Does it look like the person has one leg longer than the other? And the pictures, you're either all out at sea or they're taking it in a boat because they look like they're going up and down. Make sure they do an attractive marketing representation on their existing listings.
And we're not going to ask our neighbors and our friends to hire so we can hire a cousin, uncle, brother. We're going to hire the best person in that market that's full-time, that has that 1,000+ transactions, that has that 10,000 hours experience. Anything else?
No, I think we spoke extensively on this topic.
Probably more than we should have.
Okay.
I'm going to let you carry on with this. It is the spring, and like we said, it should be summer here. It's between 12 and 14 degrees Celsius this week, so it'll be nice and sunny. So when I look at realtor.ca, I know I'm still going to see lots of photos that have snow in them. What can we do to make our listing shine like a new listing? We're not going to take it off the market and put it back on. The buyers are typically not that stupid. They can search the history. I know a lot of people do that in the spring. So much so they have regulations now that it has to be off for 2 weeks and go back on. So you're going to miss a window.
Only if you cancel, not if it expires.
Right. Well, if it expires, you have the opportunity.
Yes.
So what I'm suggesting is hire a different photographer, a better photographer than you're using. Most agents are just using Joe Blow that does 10 different houses a day and not very well. You want to hire a really good architectural photographer. If your house hasn't sold, find out who they are or contact Patty or myself. Get your video redone and rewrite that description. The description should be written in a way that it's lifestyle and emotionally driven and not feature or engineering driven.
Absolutely. And something that doesn't sound too wishy-washy, because I will show properties and they go overboard with the, enjoy your coffee and, nights out on the deck. And I know I've done that in the past, but we've really traversed away from that. The consumer wants maybe one or two dreaming sentences, and then the rest should really be about the experience of living inside of the home, the features that they can expect, perhaps the pride of ownership. Those are the things that you really want to capture the essence of. People are not interested in reading a chapter of a fairy tale story and you trying to paint a picture. I'm just, if you're a realtor and that's the way you've been writing your overviews, I am telling you, buyers today are a little over that. One or two sentences is all you really need to capture the lifestyle of the location and then make it property focused. The other thing, aside from, now if you already have, because you've had the listing for a while, and you already have last year's summer pictures and stuff, we're not saying if you are a seller that you're going to call your realtor and say, I listened to the Michael and Patty podcast.
We're mentioning snow pictures.
Yeah, just snow pictures. It's not a matter of updating that kind of marketing material unless you've done some renovations, you've updated a few rooms, perhaps you've added something onto the property, the deck was updated. In that case, yes, you're definitely going to want the marketing representation to represent the product, the property that you have on the market. The other thing that now that we've had the frost come out of the ground and it's starting to dry up enough that the signs are not going to continuously lean, because that's typically what happens if you try to put your signs up in April. They start to tip as the frost comes out of the ground and it's all spongy and soft, is now check on your signs. Make sure if you're a seller, don't assume your real estate professional is driving by your house all the time and checking on the sign. Send them a quick little message and say, hey, just letting you know your sign. I've got great clients that always let me know, Patty, here's the status of my sign. Great. I'm going to put that on the list. So if the sign...
What do you put on those? Get rid of this high-maintenance client.
No.
Keeps complaining about the sign every time the wire tie breaks.
Not everybody wants a sign on their property, but those who do want a sign on your property, or those sellers who are off island and you're not sure, has the sign been replaced? Because our winters can be sometimes a little hard on our signs. It is sign season. Get a day scheduled in your week. Drive around to your listings, because we do cover the entire island, or most realtors do. Make sure your signs are updated if they need to be freshened or replaced because the stickers and that are coming off. Really showcase that property with your online marketing, with your signage on the property and directionals. And hopefully everyone has a great selling season this year.
Patty, my signs are made out of concrete. I don't have those issues.
No, that's because your listings last so long that you need that.
I knew that was coming. Let's slip over to AI Corner, our latest invention that we've used a couple of times. And this is what I did this week in AI. And I know you were completely impressed with the results.
Yes, actually, I was impressed with the report that it created.
So what I had a client ask me, why should I buy this property over other properties that have transacted and are available? So I figured, rather than wasting my valuable time all day producing a giant 50-page report, I would have my new assistant, Claude, produce it. Patty?
Yes, and it's not so much... We don't mind doing the work, and we still have to. We have to do the research. We have to collect the data. However, sometimes in trying to present that so that a seller is able, or a buyer client is able to process and understand and interpret all this data and numbers that we provide to them, or should be, the summary chart or report, Michael, that you shared with me was very clear. And it doesn't matter a person's education level. It would be very easy to comprehend, which made it, and because it had graphs, it had summaries, it was just very impressive. But again, I know you had to put the data together in order for Claude to be able to create the report that it did.
So Claude is an AI agent. I use that. I use ChatGPT, sometimes Gemini, Grok. What Claude is good at is analyzing data. So in the past, we've had to download data in a certain way that the AI can understand it. In this particular case, I didn't do that. As an experiment, what I did is I just took the cut sheet of the subject property, called it subject property, and then I took all the sales over the last couple of years, because this was a high-end property. There wasn't a lot of transactions in this price range. And I said, compare what has sold against the subject property and give me a compelling argument why it's priced the way it is and edify the price. Because I knew it was well worth this money. It would just take an awful long time to go through 40 or 50 cut sheets, comparing them to the subject to advocate a legitimate position, because the buyer just wanted to know that this property was worth what it was being offered for. So I put this into Claude, gave it a few prompts. I said, throw in a bunch of bar charts, pie charts, graphs, whatever. Want something that will stimulate their math or vision brain, which it did with you.
Yes, and what I wanted to make clear is your instructions prompts wasn't to have Claude convince them. It was it worth the price? So just if you're listening and you're wondering, so he instructed AI to make it look like, but that's not what he did. He requested Claude to do its research based on
justify the price,
which is exactly what the end report did.
And it said it was an amazing property, well worth every nickel, because some of the things that it had, which I don't want to get into specifics here, but it had a multitude of buildings, which the other ones didn't. It had a multitude of acreage, which the other ones didn't. It had more bedrooms, more square footage, more everything. And the price wasn't that much higher than what had sold in the past. It just made the overall picture look a lot cleaner. And that is what I find Claude is good for, as well as analyzing legal documents, which we have done on the show here in the past.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the other day, I listed a property and I couldn't see any real references to restrictive and protective covenants. The owners didn't know. I didn't think they were registered to the deed, but other owners were saying they were. So I had Claude look at the deed, and it actually pulled out this one line that referenced to another document, and that was the restrictive covenants, but it was kind of hidden in the deed.
Interesting. That's actually a really good use of it as well.
You can't do that. Don't use my AI real estate ideas.
Well, if it protects clients and ensures transparency and people understand what they're buying, I think it's invaluable.
I've been looking at commercial properties for purposes of this discussion. We're just going to talk about apartment buildings. We're not going to mix retail and malls and land and everything else into this. We're talking apartment buildings, 2-unit, 4-unit, 6-unit apartment buildings. I look at these apartments, and the other day I said to Patty, I said, I'm looking at these units and I'm thinking like the prices don't make any sense. It's like and this is a technical term, the agent pulled the number out of their ass. So you actually shared with me that you had talked to and or interrogated some of these agents and just asked them, like, where are you getting your numbers from? Well, apparently they're using methodology number 1 as per the first subject of this episode of the podcast, and they just said, so what do you want for it? But at the end of the day, the numbers didn't make any sense. They're off by hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, and that is not servicing your client. The other thing is, and I know you're a huge proponent, Michael, of making this very clear, We are real estate professionals. We are trained for residential and for land properties. There is no real estate professional that graduates with unless they have it from a third party, but it's not part of our training and program to become commercial appraisers. So if somebody is needing or requiring a commercial appraisal, they really should, and there's about a handful or so on the island, if you're a seller, get a commercial appraisal done. It will be worth the money. Yes, it's a few $1,000s, which this particular seller was not interested in paying.
And they never are.
Yeah, so they don't realize that by just having a real estate professional throw out some numbers, or again, using the example realtor number one, what do you want for it, that they are potentially leaving money on the table. I know another property where the commercial property was priced at residential amount and not commercial land amount.
And a real estate agent bought it within hours of it going on the system.
Yeah, so you really want to make sure that you do, if it's a commercial property, that you get a commercial appraisal done on it, and not, again, unless the real estate professional can show you some credentials that justifies and makes them a commercial real estate expert. We're just not trained for that.
If you can find a CCIM, which is a designation for a commercial agent, that is a great way to go. There's just not a lot of them around. I did some of my education for CCIM, but trying to get credentialed for that in the Maritimes is virtually impossible because of the sales numbers they're looking for. We'd have to sell the whole province off. But if you can find an agent that specializes in apartments, and there's very few of them, but they are out there, that's who you want to be talking to, or get a commercial appraiser do. I'm trying to think of the designation for the commercial appraiser.
I can't think of the name.
AACI.
Oh, is that what you're... Okay.
Appraised according to customers' instructions. That's not what it stands for.
No, I know.
That's the inside joke.
Okay.
The other day, Patty, and I know you've had this happen before, I was driving to Summerside from Charlottetown, and I drove past a pig with lipstick.
Not literally.
That's a real estate term. What does that mean?
It means it is a house that somebody has made look pretty, but really needs a lot of work.
So this house that I drove by was probably one of the worst homes I've been in ever. I went into the basement, and the basement was a built-in lake or pond. They had shipping skids on the floor of the basement to walk on so you could traverse from one side to the other without getting water up to your ankles. The house was filled with mold. The list went on and on and on and on. I drove by it. It's now for sale. Guess what it's got?
What?
Vinyl siding, vinyl windows, new roof. Boy, does it look great. Until such time as you tear that vinyl off and you find out it's probably all rotten wood. Vinyl is a great protector against the elements, but it's also a great way to put lipstick on a pig. And I was thinking, well, how do you really defend yourself against this? Because you can't start tearing siding off. But one thing you can do is you can talk to agents that know the house, or you can get a home inspection, which can be done to a point. You can put a thermal imaging gun through the house to see if it's insulated properly or there's any issues. You can look at the pictures. Look at the
previous history,
previous MLS pictures. If it looks like something from the Beverly Hillbillies, but today it looks pretty with new windows, siding, and roofing, then you may have an issue there.
I would like to think and believe that if it had serious issues like structural or mold, either they had some company come in and there's some sort of certificate saying that it was remediated because that is what would be required, and that somebody wouldn't hide that because that is illegal to go ahead and hide defects like mold and hope that if they see it, they see it. If they don't, they don't. So we as real estate professionals should be ensuring that we disclose everything that we know about the property. So for you, Michael, if you were representing a buyer, knowing the information that you did, obviously you're not going to plant seeds and make a big issue out of the property unless when you're in there, because you've got previous knowledge, you know what questions to ask the listing agent prior to bringing your client through. You know what to look for when you're in the house. But if you don't have experience with that property and you're going to show it, you might want to do a little bit of research, especially now. I know it's hard when someone gives you 18 to 20 properties and they want to go through all of them to do a deep dive. That will take you a month to go through and pull everything you possibly can to try to learn as much as you can.
But you don't do that. You'd center on one property or two.
That's what I'm saying. However, when you're done, and if there is one or two properties, and hopefully you have a couple when you're at the end of the day, then that's the time for the realtor to really do a deep dive, make sure everything looks good, and that it isn't a pig with lipstick at the end of the day, just trying to, quickly be sold off. But most don't do that.
I have a question.
Sure.
Did somebody really put lipstick on a pig, and was this deemed to be attractive?
You know what? Where is the origin of that line?
Maybe it's from the Muppets.
Maybe.
Question. I'm looking for a cottage that I'm going to use for an Airbnb, so they're going to rent it out daily or weekly. In what location should I buy? Do you want to answer this, or shall I?
Well, the location that I would be recommending that they look at is one that would actually have touristy kind of attractions if they want to be booked up, whether it's the trails, because there's many bicyclists that come here and they want access to the trails and would stay, or that it's within driving distance, which most places are here on the island, beaches, easy access if you're coming over on the bridge or if you're taking the ferry over. So location would be very important based on whatever kind of amenities and needs that you're hoping to create as an experience. What is it that you're going to respond with?
Well, we mentioned Airbnbs. So
Correct.
Can I Airbnb everything?
Can you Airbnb? Not in certain municipalities that they will not allow it.
If there's local bylaws, laws, more importantly, pertaining to cottages, you're usually looking more at restrictive and or protective covenants. In Prince Edward Island, there's probably only, if a handful of subdivisions that do not allow or preclude having Airbnbs. They usually have something in the protective or restrictive covenants that say you can only have friends or friends or family members stay at the premise, not turn it into a commercial rental.
Yeah, and that's for respect of the others who have bought into that particular subdivision. So if you're thinking, what a stupid, covenant or rule to have for the subdivision, that's there because if the neighbors have children and you have such a transient property next door, it would affect their experience, affect their feeling safe and relaxed, and again, to allow the family to just explore and enjoy the cottage. So that's why some subdivisions do have that in place.
Where I've seen this happen is typically with somebody that has a larger home and they have 300 or 400 of their closest friends drop by for a weekend and turn it into party central for endless days. And that's usually when they put this in the restrictive or protective covenants. But to make a long story short, if it's possible at this point, is number one, what's your budget? Number two, I would want to be as close to the center of the universe as possible. Every real estate market has a center of the universe. Whatever state or province you're in, there's usually a larger community that the real estate values will increase, assuming you're not talking about a city that's in bankruptcy, in value. So in our province, I would say buy something as close to Charlottetown or 15 to 20 minutes away from Charlottetown, where the airport is, the shopping, Home Depot, grocery stores, hospital, all that sort of stuff. And that will ensure that down at the end of the day, you have the most important thing, which a lot of non-professional real estate buyers don't look at, which is an exit strategy. Typically, properties closer to the center of the universe which in PEI is Charlottetown, will sell quicker and for more money?
I typically say within 15 to 20 minutes of Summerside. Again, for amenity needs and that. Summerside has the credit unions. They've got some great concerts. If you're coming here to the island, they've got some great events as well. And you're probably safe anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes is, again, and that's the value of having both of us on here, Michael, because we just have a little bit of a different
So
spin
you're
or
saying
opinion.
centered to Summerside. I'm saying centered to Charlottetown, or did I mishear you?
No, I am telling the listeners my spiel. What I say is 15 to 20 minutes of Summerside is usually a safe radius. And then anywhere from 30, 40 minutes from Charlottetown. I wouldn't just make it so tight as 15, 20 minutes. Because define where Charlottetown.
Well, it depends on the budget, too.
Yeah, it depends on the budget, but also what point in Charlottetown? Are you talking about the outside perimeter of Charlottetown, or are you talking about city center and 15, 20 minutes? Because that doesn't get you very far.
I'm talking about the little red house that needs renovations right downtown across from the variety store.
So you have a particular
That's the center
point.
of the universe is that house.
I'm just making it clear. From the city perimeters, you're a good 30 to 40 minutes. Most people, and here on the island, it is a pretty drive. It's not like you're driving. I know I'm from Ontario, which is the only reason why I'm going to reference this, but where I was from and when we used to drive up to Collingwood or Goderich or Grand Bend, and you're doing that drive to the cottage on a Friday after work, it's bumper to bumper, it's stressful, you've got highways. That's not the drive here on the island. So a 30, 40-minute drive is a very pleasant one.
What if I'm going to use it year-round and it's the winter, and now that 30 or 40-minute drive turns out to be an hour and a half?
Well, in that case, what I would be saying is if the weather is that bad that it's going to take you that long to get into work, it's probably too bad for any of us to go to work.
I have a Honda Civic with banana skin tires and no windows.
Don't go to work on a bad weather day.
The other thing to look out for is that distance will increase when it's farming season, when they're planting or they're harvesting, especially down the farmers' roads like 225, Kincora Road. There seems to be an abundance of farm tractors, which can slow you down, so those 30 or 40 minutes can be escalated. Moving along, Patty, I have an individual here that's in your home province.
Really?
And he's been through a particular property numerous times. He's done absolutely every possible due diligence thing one can think of. He's made offers and they've all been turned down, so he thought his latest course of action would be to reach out to the home seller himself down in the States and try to make an offer over social media. Now, if you had to pick from 3 options, bad idea, really bad idea, or super bad idea, which one would you pick pertaining to this particular purchaser's avenue to pursue this house?
It is a super bad idea.
Well said. So basically what happens is the homeowner contacted me. He said this dude reached out to me on social media, made me another lousy offer, and I turned him down. And basically, I just said, don't talk to him anymore. I'll handle it from here. We've got him back on track. We've actually shown this person where the value is, and hopefully we'll be able to put something together. But you've hired an agent to represent you. Let that agent do that. Do that, because if you get in the middle of things, you could hamper the abilities of the agents that are trying to put this deal together.
So in this buyer's defense, I'm going to say they must have had a bad experience with a real estate professional.
No, they didn't.
And they've put us all into the same category and feels that they are a better negotiator. They can get a better deal at the end of the day if they did it themselves. And I'm going to say that is still a really bad idea. You just didn't have the right representation.
What the listing agent knows the motivation of the seller. The buyer's agent can communicate with the listing agent to find out what is that seller looking for. we know what that seller is looking for. In this particular case, if you want to go down to a microscopic level, this buyer felt that this particular seller wanted somebody to buy the house that cared about the house and the story. And at the end of the day, the vendor does not care one way or the other. But the buyer didn't think that was being conveyed, and he thought that was his form of money to buy this property, was the sentimental value the vendor may have on the house, which there is none.
Yeah, and again, because I know, and we had a little conversation a bit yesterday about this, Michael, just with regards to putting warm, fuzzy stories about buyers,
the letter,
and a seller putting in a letter as to perhaps why they, loved this property or what the property meant to them. And at the end of the day, majority of transactions go together based on something very just basic and concrete, and that's business, and that's the numbers, and those are the conditions and terms that make the most amount of sense for both parties. Some transactions, the emotional, the human component or aspect can help, but it's not the majority of the transactions that happen.
Most people don't care about the letter. What's the price, the closing date, what's included, what are the conditions, home inspection, insurance, financing, whatever. IRAC, Island Regulatory Appeals Commission, that we have here locally for properties over 5 acres, 165 feet of water frontage. That's what they look at. The letter, I haven't seen it hold lots of weight. And you were talking the other day about, potentially having sellers write letters. The best thing, and I said this to you, best thing the seller can write up is probably a addendum, which lists additional. This is when you can get into the mechanical features. We had the attic insulated, the walls were insulated, we got new Tyvek, new siding, new doors, new locks, new electrical panels, whatever, generator hookup. That can go into an addendum. But as far as writing a letter explaining to somebody how pretty your house is and how you've loved it and how little Billie Jean was conceived in the living room at Christmas, I don't think is really going to sell the house.
No, but I agree with you.
Be quite the Christmas birth, wouldn't it?
Okay, Michael. I would agree with you. If you want to convey the property was loved, how you can convey that from a seller's point of view, that a property has been loved,
that it's cared for,
is by giving a list of all the things that were done to care for the property. You do not have to get into the warm fuzzies and a story necessarily. Your update list is your story, so don't underestimate completing a property condition disclosure statement, because that also can convey that this property has been respected, it has been cared for, it has been serviced, the system serviced, everything taken care of. That is your "this home has been loved" list. So your property condition disclosure statement, and like you recommended, suggested, Michael, a list of updates and improvements that have been done over the years or since this person had owned the property.
Here's a little home inspection tip. We're going to get into breaker panels. Everybody knows what a breaker panel is, Patty?
I believe they do.
That would be the large electrical panel that's attached to the feed that usually comes to your house from telephone poles, sometimes underground. It feeds a main circuit breaker, which in most cases is 100 or 200 amps, sometimes less with older homes, sometimes newer with really, really new homes. We're seeing 300s, not so much in this province yet, but I do hear they're coming. So every circuit has a breaker, and there's only so many little holes for so many breakers, depending on the panel. Typically, a 200 amp panel is bigger than a 100 amp. What I have noticed many times looking at houses is I was looking at a newer house, 10 to 15 years old, and I noticed the whole half of the panel was empty. And then I go into an old home that was 50, 60 years old, again with a 100 amp panel. The whole panel was full, plus they had a sub-panel. What's the difference between those two houses, and why would I want the wiring from the old house opposed to the new one?
Because of the way the wiring was set up. So you don't have as much of a load on one breaker versus the newer home, where the panel is still only half filled. Well, each of those breakers are probably pretty loaded with 2 or 3 bedrooms in it, the kitchen and living room. Like, they've really just put the maximum amount instead of kind of spreading it out more, which maybe, I don't know, Michael, because I don't build homes, but perhaps back in the day, that was what made sense. Put one breaker on like one room or
Why it
load.
made sense is copper wasn't as expensive back then as it is today. And if you check out the copper
Okay.
wiring from a 60-year-old home, you'll probably find it's much higher quality. It's probably a thicker gauge, even though the gauge spec's usually 12 to 14 gauge, depending on if you're running a 15 or 20 amp circuit. Again, I'm not an electrician. But the point I'm making is, if you've got a newer home, half the panel's empty, this electrician has maxed out the Canadian or the American electrical code, and they've got the whole garage is probably on one breaker. So you probably got your lights, all your electrical, everything is in one breaker. I've personally experienced this, and it's annoying. You turn your compressor on, you have to turn your lights off first. You want to fire up a pressure sprayer, well, make sure the compressor and all the lights are off, and you don't have a shop vac with you because it needs to plug in outside, which is probably tied into the garage as well. Pay attention to that breaker panel. Also pay attention to the manufacturer and see if that panel is an expensive or an inexpensive panel, because chances are if they've cheaped out on the circuits, they've cheaped out on the panel, they're not going to not cheap out on the house. Electrical panel is the underwear of the house.
Ooh, that's pretty good.
I should put that on a plaque.
That's pretty funny. But not something, Michael, that unless you actually sometimes live it within or you encounter it, would you even think of? You just think, oh, great, I got half a panel free here, without really understanding the why behind it.
We're going to talk about signage real quick. So there's many, many books and courses on signage, but essentially, when you have a sign, whether it's for a restaurant, retail store, or in this instance, for purposes of this podcast, a for sale sign, and you've got traffic driving by, and I'm thinking of a particular scenario at 80 kilometers or 50 miles per hour, do not make the sign a novel or your complete biography. For instance, I had condos for sale. I knew the average speed past this place was probably 100 kilometers an hour. All I put on it was condos for sale, name, brokerage, arrow. That's it. But sometimes you see a lot of signs that are packing a lot of information and absolutely none of it can be read. Just 2 weeks ago, we had to pull into a parking lot of an apartment building to see what the sign even was.
Yes, because we weren't sure whether it was a home business and they were selling crafts at home. The other thing is, what I see, Michael, and I'm sure you have, where there are directionals in that. If you're with a brand, if you're with a recognized real estate brokerage name, and this is to realtors, and you think your name is
An egomaniac.
Equivalent to Cher
And a
or
big picture
Elvis,
of themselves.
and that somebody who is new visiting the island is going to realize they just drove by a celebrity, they're not. And because you don't have your real estate brokerage name on it, they will not know who to contact. They won't know. It's just a really bad idea. So make sure you have your real estate brokerage. If anything, then they'll know, oh, it's ABC Realty. They may completely forget in the few seconds or not able to read the name, but they'll know which brokerage to reach out to. Very, very important. Unless somebody on this island that I don't know really is Cher selling real estate and she has her license here, put the brokerage name on it. At least they'll know it's real estate and at least they'll know who to contact. Thanks again for listening to another exciting information-packed episode of the Michael and Patty Show, otherwise known as MAPS, PEI's podcast that helps guide and navigate you through the buying and selling and a little bit of Prince Edward Island. We appreciate each and every one of you for downloading and listening, and also appreciate the questions that you send in so that we can do some research and answer them here for you. If you're looking for an extension to this podcast, we do have a private Facebook group called Moving to Prince Edward Island from the Michael and Patty podcast, where you can become a member and get even more information than what we share here. where we provide summaries so you can kind of cherry pick which episode is most relevant to you and where you are at, as well as a Toolbox Tuesday. There's almost a year of those, Michael, filled with information on different topics. I don't give you one or two, I give you a whole toolbox, hence the name Toolbox Tuesday, and then other just fun posts and things that are there. Thanks again for listening.
That's it. Over and out. There's about 14 yachts in front of us. Hopefully there'll be 50 next week. That's it.
That's it. Sounds good. That's a wrap.